Almost a year after the Second World War had ended, Stalin's intelligence services embarked on a massive and secret investigation. Codenamed Operation Myth, it was subtitled An Investigation into the Disappearance of Adolf Hitler. The secrets of Operation Myth have been locked away in the Moscow State Archive for 50 years, until now.
We only discovered these files about 2 years ago. Before that, they were so sensitive that their very existence wasn't even recorded here.
Operation Myth was sparked by Soviet fears that Hitler might have escaped from Berlin. It began with repeated and brutal interrogations of captured survivors from the Berlin bunker and culminated in a forensic whodunit that led to the discovery of Hitler's skull. This was the last and most thorough in a line of investigations that had begun even before the war had ended. In 1938, Hitler had said, "Give me 10 years, and you'll not recognize Germany again." His timing was only slightly out. This was Berlin in May 1945, torn apart by weeks of bombardment from Allied aircraft and Soviet artillery. On May the 2nd, the German forces defending Berlin surrendered to the Red Army.
Удивительный день, потому что
It was an amazing day, because the thunder had suddenly stopped, the endless thunder of fighting and artillery. The Germans were throwing down their weapons, and many of them were taking off their helmets too, and throwing them on the ground. Then they were lined up into columns. It seemed like the entire Berlin army was there.
Очень большое войско.
But even capturing Berlin was not enough for Stalin. He wanted Hitler, dead or alive, and every Soviet brigade wanted to find the Führer and present him to Stalin. The reconnaissance unit of the 3rd Shock Army had scoured the streets, questioning anyone who might have information on Hitler's whereabouts. Even before the city fell, it had pinpointed his hiding place.
Девушка перешла линию фронта.
We'd found a young woman who was trying to get across the front line.
Она сопровождала.
She told us that she was a nurse and that she had taken some wounded people to the Reich Chancellery.
В Райхканцелярии.
And when she got there, she'd heard from other medical staff and some soldiers that Hitler was there in his bunker.
Там, в бункере.
The entrance to the bunker complex stood here, in the center of Berlin. Hitler's quarters were 50 feet below ground, surrounded by a warren of small rooms and narrow corridors that ran under the Potsdamer Platz into the bowels of the Chancellery. These are the last pictures of the bunker, taken just before it was sealed by the East Germans in 1988. The murals by Hitler's SS bodyguards would have been amongst the first sights to greet the Russians who entered here on May the 2nd, 1945. By that time, Soviet intelligence had learnt that several of Hitler's closest advisors, including Nazi Party Secretary Martin Bormann and Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels, had been living in the bunker during the last days of the battle. Hitler himself had taken up residence here on January the 17th. This is the last photograph taken of him, standing by the bunker entrance surveying bomb damage. When, on May the 2nd, the first Soviet troops reached the Reich Chancellery, they found Hitler's world in ruin. Passing through the building to the garden beyond, they arrived at the emergency exit to the bunker. There, on the ground, a few feet away, lay the charred bodies of Joseph Goebbels and his wife, Magda. Their 6 children were later found dead in their beds inside the bunker. They had been poisoned.
Nur Frau Goebbels.
It was just Frau Goebbels. She was the only one who didn't want to let the children go. She wanted them to die with her. And I remember Dr. Naumann telling me that Goebbels himself had wanted the children to be evacuated from Berlin. After the children were dead, Frau Goebbels came downstairs crying. She sat at the table in the room next to mine and started playing a game of cards, a game of patience.
Next to arrive at the Chancellery was the reconnaissance unit of the 3rd Shock Army. They brought with them one of Hitler's former confidants, Admiral Voss, now a Soviet prisoner.
Прежде всего, мы обратили внимание,
The first thing we saw there was a large, dried-up fountain made of concrete.
довольно большое такое бетонное сооружение.
It was full of dead bodies. You couldn't fail to notice it the moment you walked in.
Это обратило на себя внимание любого человека. Одновременно
Voss went over to look in it and called out, "Wait a minute, this is what you're looking for. Here he is. That's Hitler." Then he studied the body for a time, and finally he said, "No, I was wrong. It's not Hitler."
But the press was told that Hitler had been found, causing embarrassment and anger in Moscow.
И была такая,
There was one other detail. Maybe I'm wrong, but the body had no shoes on, only socks, and they were darned. Tell me, would Hitler wear darned socks? Surely not.
не мог.
The following day, the Smersh counterintelligence unit joined the hunt for Hitler in the Chancellery. Like those before them, they made their way to the bunker exit.
Один из этих бойцов обратил внимание, это совсем рядом.
One of the soldiers noticed that about 3 meters from the bunker doorway, some earth had been disturbed. So they started digging and found 2 badly charred bodies. But they decided it wasn't Hitler, so they simply buried them again.
Они решили, что это не Гитлер, и закопали обратно.
But the next day, interrogators learned from high-ranking prisoners that the bodies of Hitler and his longtime mistress, Eva Braun, had been burnt before burial. So the 2 charred corpses were exhumed again.
Такая масса сгоревшего тела, но с элементами все-таки человеческой.
It was all a mass of burnt flesh. There were elements of human form. There was a hand and some other recognizable features. I mean, it was clearly a human being and a body of a man. But I had no wish to examine it in any detail, and the face was unrecognizable. So maybe it was Hitler. So what?
Это Гитлер, ну Гитлер.